Yeah, to get in the mood for just giving your life over. You know, there's a part in the manual for teachers where the topic is, how is healing accomplished? We already talked about that first night, that healing's not a process. It's a state of mind. It's an acceptance of what is the state of mind. And in that section, he basically says, it only has one requirement too. That's kind of nice. Healing only has one requirement, and that you see that the mind and not the body is the decision maker. So you see, that's what atonement is. It's letting go of the belief that as a person you have choices, and starting to realize that you need do nothing, that every decision has already been made for you, and all you have to do is accept the Holy Spirit's presence in the present moment. And then that complicated process of decision-making in linear time, poof, and never was. And then Jesus says, after he gives you the one criteria, you know, it's the mind and not the body, that's the decision maker, he says, what does this recognition cost you? It costs you the whole world you see. That's all. I put the "that's all" in there for comical purposes, but actually, you know, that's a topic of guidance. I said that was my favorite topic, and yet all the intellectual questions dissolve into the guidance. All the philosophical questions dissolve into the guidance. All the conceptual questions and the attempts to have a conceptual understanding all dissolve into the guidance. That peace and understanding go together and cannot be found apart. And that peace that we talked about, I think Phil mentioned, the peace that passeth the understanding of the world, that peace and that understanding is not a conceptual understanding. So you have to literally transcend the intellect to go into that direct experience. And that's really why everyone came to this retreat. They came for the direct experience. They didn't come to take a few more concepts back home and go, oh, this is what I learned. This concept of this and this, you know. They came for, everyone comes for joy, for peace, for happiness, for connection, for healing. That is the purpose. And so where we can give a lot of parables and we can give a lot of examples, you know, I think every state in the United States has a little slogan. I think with Ohio, it's in the center of it all. And with Missouri is the show me state. So tonight we're going to have a movie gathering so I can show you. We've spoken about the guidance. I told you it's really the answer to any question that you have. Whenever you ask a question, you're really just asking to have present guidance. The question really isn't about the past or the future. Underneath the question is just, I want to be guided in this moment. And that will take you all the way to heaven, that guidance. So really it's not a kind of a complex thing, it's just how willing am I to pray, listen, and follow in this moment. That's really the key. That's where the rubber meets the road. That's the practicality of how willing am I to follow the guidance. Because, of course, the guidance is designed to unwind the false concept, the false self-concept that was made by the ego, which involves the personality self and the world that surrounds the personality self. So we watched a movie last night and we could see all the roles that the main character had. they both had their roles, and immediately these roles were brought into question by their little dream scenario, and then another dream scenario, and then another, and always there was a loosening of the identification with the roles. And so that's good to know, because that gives you a little bit of context for the journey, that you can't really tell what the guidance will be, but if you just are willing to follow it and you're willing to go on into an adventure with that guidance, it will be an awakening adventure. And that's the kind of adventure you want. You've had enough of the linear earthly adventures, probably for millennium. But now it's time to go for a vertical adventure. Get off the cross and go vertical. I had a friend who channeled like 287 songs from the angels, and she would come out and she would write it down, and then she would get her guitar out and she would burst laughing, and she would go, "You want to hear the latest song from the angels?" And I'd say, "Yeah." Sometimes I'd even do a gathering. She would disappear while I was doing the gathering, come back. The angels wrote a song for my gathering, and then she'd come back and sing it. It would be everything, every point that I discussed, spontaneously in an angel song. Everyone was like, "Did you just write that?" And she said, "I just received it." That's why I left the room, so I could get the song. But one of the songs was, "Come down, come down, come down from the cross. There is no sin and your soul is not lost. You have been dreaming a world of sad thoughts. Come down from the cross." Whoa, we can get into that kind of vibe. That's an angelic song. It takes us beyond the perspective of religions and theologies and punishment and crucifixion, and just says, "Come down from the cross," or "Go vertical. Get off the horizontal, get into the vertical. Go right to the light." So tonight, I thought I would show you with some commentary and setup. I will take you on an adventure, and we are going to pull from what we call one of our Movie Watcher's Guide to Enlightenment classics. Classic tonight, on guidance. Probably one of the best movies you will ever see on guidance. You would be hard-pressed to find a better movie on guidance than this. And oh yeah, it's got great actors, actresses in it. Charlize Theron. The thing about it though is the movie maker, the director of the movie, is exquisite. This is an Academy Award-winning director, and when you look at acting and directing, it's like the Holy Spirit is really kind of the director of the awakening script, bringing in everything you need perfectly, cued perfectly, so you can't miss the lesson. So you need a masterful director, and the director of this film is Robert Redford. Robert's one of our neighbors. We live a couple canyons over from Robert Redford's Sundance. It was a Sundance retreat and ski resort, and he owned it up until a couple years ago. He's 87 now, but people would go up there and bump into him, and he'd just sit down and have a cup of coffee, talk to you, real down-to-earth, legendary actor, legendary director, and this is probably his biggest contribution to spiritual awakening. This is the best of Robert Redford in this movie. It's a masterpiece. If you want to get in touch with guidance, what better than the Holy Spirit using Robert Redford's skills and together with amazing cast. And the thing I like about this is you will see the Holy Spirit character in the movie played by Will Smith, and basically it's going to come through in a way that's super gentle, super, super, super gentle. Because when there's fear and there's resistance, the best thing is gentleness. The Holy Spirit is exceedingly gentle. In fact, in the Course in Miracles, Jesus says the Holy Spirit never demands and never commands. Wouldn't you like that as a teacher? Never demands and never commands. Like Muna, you were saying, with this kind of memory of a kind of a jagged, abusive past, what you're really praying for is an inner teacher that never commands and never demands, and always meets fear and resistance and doubt with the softest, like a feather pillow. Say, here, lay down your head on the feather pillow. And that's definitely what the Will Smith character in this, he plays a caddy. This is a golf movie. This is using the sport of golf to unwind the mind gently, unwind the mind from terror, from depression, from disillusionment, from just a sense of giving up on the world and giving up on life. Matt Damon plays the main character, and he's lost in alcohol, trying to just drown his sorrows, having gone off to a war and become so disillusioned, as many people are when they go off to war. And they come back with all kinds of, reactions to sights and sounds, because it was so traumatic that they basically have trouble functioning. A lot of veterans come back. And so here we have someone who was a very good golfer, amateur golfer, goes off to a war, and he comes back a broken man with deep psychological wounds. So he's tapped into the unconscious that Jesus talks about. He's had a direct tapping into through the experience of war, and now he needs to be lifted up in some way. He needs help. But how this movie is really for all of us, to show us that no matter how dark it gets and no matter how judgmental we are and critical of ourselves, that the help is always there. We just need to ask and be able to open to it. So the main key is going to be willingness, because when the mind follows the ego and gets very closed off, like that first improv today, we saw Nicholas was over on the left, closed off in his own little cell, crying and afraid and timid and everything like that. Well, the ego likes it when the mind gets into that kind of crouching position of feeling like it's lost hope. The ego is thrilled when the mind loses hope. And then this movie is going to start there and then take us through a journey where you'll actually get to see, in a Robert Redford movie, the guidance acted out. So you can see it. You can see it in action. And then you can apply it to your own mind, to your own circumstances. You can transfer it from what you see on the screen to your mind. Seeing that, I've got to be geared up and willing to take a leap. I have to be willing to follow the guidance. When I start to tap into it, that's just step one, but I have to actually be willing to follow the guidance as it comes in. Oh, here we go. The gang's all here. So I was giving a quick little introduction here, saying tonight we're going to see guidance in action. We're going to witness it. We're going to watch it. We're going to do it thoroughly too. This movie takes place in Augusta, Georgia. Has anybody here been to Augusta, Georgia? Green, rolling hills, trees, warm temperatures. I just took a trip not too long ago came very close, came through Georgia, right near Augusta. And you might think of all the different places in the United States, this place is like the hearth. It's green, it's rich, it's lush. If you were going to go through a spiritual awakening, wouldn't you want to be like held in a soft, warm, green basket of lush environment? And that's what our environment is here for the movie. So he's come back from the war, and now he's got to go through pretty much depression, post-traumatic stress syndrome, all of that. He's messed up. He's got regrets about his relationships, his past. He just feels lost, completely lost, drowning his sorrow in alcohol and trying to drink as much alcohol as he can to completely drown out his misery. And then we're going to watch how the Holy Spirit kind of reaches in and lifts his mind up higher and higher and higher and higher, even though he has still resistances and doubts. He's carried step by step, piece by piece. So let's just sit back and enjoy the movie. I'll pause it from time to time when there's a key point or something to add a little bit to, but yeah, get ready for a classic. You're going to be glad you saw this one. So there's a good contrast, a good striking example. An amateur athlete at the top, the pinnacle of success with golf, and a relationship with Adele, the daughter of the wealthiest person in Savannah, ballrooms, dances, fine dining, the swirl of the country in what the world would call the height of prosperity, and then going over and going into the war and going through such a disillusionment. It's almost like whatever you believe was special about the world, all the gloss is taken off. The war was just psychologically devastating. He just wants to withdraw. He was just trying to get off that bus and kind of crawl through there and get away. He didn't want to interact with anybody. And here comes Adele, and you can see just her feet. She stands there. So now he's been slapped with war and special relationship, special love, and wham, slapped in the face with special hate. How could you desert me? How could you abandon me? Rejection, all those intense feelings. And so that's really important context before you start to open the guidance, is you have to start to have a glimmering that there has to be more than this world has to offer. Because if you still are going for what the world and the ego have to offer, then you're going to be asking of guidance of death. You're going to have death be your advisor. It's really just one of two. It's either the Holy Spirit or it's death. And there is no other. There aren't any gradations in middle. There's no other options. And so everyone goes through a period of disillusionment after attaining things in the world, and it doesn't bring a satisfaction. It doesn't bring a fulfillment. You think of Mick Jagger and the Rolling Stones. What's the song everybody remembers? I can't get no satisfaction. And then he goes, and I've tried, and I've tried, and I've tried, and I've tried. I can't get no, thank you, Mick. Because Mick has made a song that touched a chord where people feel with this world like it's like on a treadmill. And where is the end? Jesus says there's an outstanding characteristic of everything that you've pursued in this world. When you have achieved it, it has not satisfied you. And therefore the ego is forced to give you something else to chase. Because its whole thing is the game is of pursuing nothing and trying to convince you it's something. So you'll put all your time and effort and money and focus on pursuing nothing. And Shakespeare said this world was much ado about nothing. But that's the first thing that comes, is like a disillusionment, like, wow, I've tried and tried, and I didn't find the fulfillment. In the Bible, Jesus says, seek and ye shall find, knock and the door shall be opened. And in A Course in Miracles, Jesus unveils the ego's plan of salvation, seek and do not find. A world of distractions projected by the ego to keep you from knowing who you are. A world of false pursuits. And there's even a part pretty late in the text of the Course where Jesus says, all of the world's roadways lead to death. That's a really strong statement. All of the world's roadways lead to death. And he said, men have died upon seeing this. But if they just gone one more step in faith and hope and trust, they could have been led to heights of happiness beyond the trench of total despair and depth and death is heights of happiness. So we relive the tiny tick of time, the tiny terror, and it comes in all kinds of sorts of doubts and fears and hesitations and pains, and it comes in subtle ways, in terms of subtle guilt and being a little afraid of certain things. But actually, it's all part of one thing, and that's a scheme to keep the mind from remembering the light and knowing the truth. And yet, once you get to a certain point, you think, I'm going to go for the truth. This is now my priority. If it's the last thing that I do, I'm going to go for truth. I've tried it on my own, now I'm going to go with the guidance of the Spirit and let the guidance go before me and direct my decisions. And that's what unwinds the mind from this scheme of ontological guilt, is just through the listen and follow. That's why guidance is so important. There will be nothing more practical than guidance, because the momentary guidance and getting in touch with that is really, it's kind of a binary thing. Computers run on a binary system of ones and zeros, and we'll say the one is the Holy Spirit and the zero is the ego. The one leads you to oneness, and the zero leads nowhere and to nothing. It's a zero. So here we go, we're ready to launch. He's come back, and now this is the point when things have fallen away, and they have fallen away for Juna. Now he's actually cracked open, and he's a little bit closer to the guidance. Before, he was off in distractions, believing he was gliding down the highway, when in fact he was slip-sliding away. And now he's been brought almost like down to his knees. And whenever we're brought to our knees, that's a good thing, because then we're ready for a change. We're ready for an actual significant change of purpose in our mind, and that's where everything takes off. So there's some true empathy, seeing the spark, seeing the truth, seeing the strength, regardless of the appearances. He feels like he's lost his swing, and it's just a golfing term for, I've lost touch with my connection. I've lost touch with my joy. I've lost touch with my intuition. I've lost touch with the Spirit. And so everyone can relate to that. That's what makes this such a good teaching movie, because it's not using any religious, any spiritual terms, but it's just Robert Redford doing the master teaching class, using characters to teach the core lesson of having to turn your mind from upside down, Jesus would say, to right side up. And that's a big turn. And it's intense. When you start to turn right side up, it gets more and more intense, because the fear of love is great. The fear of divine love. And it's only great because the mind is identified with the ego. It's the ego that is afraid of love. But when the mind's identified with the ego, then it's afraid of love. Jesus says, you feel the ego's feelings. So you never are actually afraid, but you just are feeling the feelings of the ego by identifying with it. So this is the beginning of, we can see the rock bottom disillusionment, but you can see the little reflections here of the sparks of, you can do it. I believe in you. And there's now the whole room is filled with, we believe in you, and we need you. And that's a pretty strong invitation. And I think that's also a reflection of the mind. When you've had enough, when you really do hit what feels like a rock bottom, and you just think, like Bill Thetford said to Helen Schuckman, there has to be a better way. And he was surprised when she said, you're right, Bill, and I'll help you find it. And that's that joining and connection. So that's a key to opening to the guidance. It's just to reach that point where you have a spark, just a slight spark, to go for something, to find a better way, to find your way out of the dark hole of this. He's just in touch with all this unconscious darkness and guilt. Particularly the reflection of the war, that really brought it to the surface of consciousness. It was just absolutely devastating. And for most human beings, of course, they're not in touch with the unconscious mind, because they would feel the same devastation here that Juna felt. There he says Jesus. And all I have to say is, God knows the prayer of our heart before we even utter the word. God knows the prayer of our heart. And God always answers. Always answers. Here we go. He was saying when he was drinking with his buddies playing cards that the hardest ones to kill off, the hardest brain cells were the memories. And of course, memory, Jesus tells us in A Course in Miracles that memory is an ability, he says, that you made after the fall. So after the fall from grace, the mind just started making up abilities, and memory was one of them. And then Jesus says, you're so accustomed to associating this ability that you made with the past. But it's possible to use this ability with the present, because the Holy Spirit can use anything that the ego made to free your mind. So, wow, remember the present. Use the ability to remember it. Now we can see when he went back, he was just going to go there and face Adele. He didn't know he was going to face his demons so he could begin to find his stroke, get his stroke back. But when he was there with her, you could just see how awkward it was, just even dancing with her. And this is past association. This just shows you how dark the past is. And we just watched that movie last night where there were all these scenarios to start to loosen from the roles. And that's the journey that we go on when we follow the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit's going to help us unwind, release, let go of past associations and past roles. And meanwhile, the Holy Spirit's going to use memory, which is an ability that was made by the ego, in miraculous ways to bring us back to the holy instant, using the present memory. That's what the best use of memory is, to remember the present. So it's a washing away, but as Jesus tells us in his text, he says the Holy Spirit's task is the exchange of concepts. So it's not like the old magic trick where, the magician tries to pull the tablecloth off of the table with all the china and candlesticks and silverware, pull it off. But what it is that the Holy Spirit has to exchange concepts. And that's why if you practice A Course in Miracles, you will find there's some interesting concepts in there. One of them is called Teacher of God. He's going to give you a Teacher of God concept to use in place of all the other ones that we've had. And we've had many. We've played many roles. We've worn many hats. But little by little, that's what the script will seem to be as you start to follow this, because he's going to use Teacher of God and Miracle Worker. Most of us didn't grow up being told by our parents, you grow up, you're going to be a miracle worker for God. That was not. You, when 6, you were talking to Jesus. You might have heard it a little bit in your own mind, but not usually from mom and dad. They have a lot of aspirations for us to become something important, make them proud. But actually, miracle worker, Teacher of God, is what happens. When you start to go deeper with this, you have to start to let the Spirit start to exchange those kind of ideas, those kind of roles for the ones that you previously played. And you could see that was what the theme was last night. Both Engen and Palin were so afraid of marriage and commitment that when they got their scenario, they were thrown immediately into bed with wedding rings. So they had to face the things that they were most afraid of. And they were shocked, actually. They were like fish out of the water. But they had to slowly go from that into the next thing, into the next thing, until she's pregnant. I mean, it just kept going and going with that symbol. But that's how we face the fears, by getting into this divine purpose that we're given, and then slowly the roles that we identified with in this world start to loosen in our mind, and they become more peripheral. And Jesus says, people will look at you and they'll see you as they saw you from the past. But inside, you'll be different. You're going to start to feel different. You feel more expansive. You feel more connected. You feel more aligned. Even though people seem to see you from the past. That's like, even with Jesus, when he was on his divine mission, public mission, when he went back to Nazareth, that's when it was spoken of the Bible, a prophet is never a prophet in his hometown. Some of you might have even seen the Chosen episode when he goes back with Mary, and where are his brothers? They have left the house to go quickly to the next town to not be around when Jesus comes home. And Mary's trying to make excuses. Oh, hit some important things. But it's just, past associations are very thick. And as you start to go deeper and deeper, you're letting go of the past. And you're feeling different. You're feeling more like a miracle worker, even though that's the last thing on earth you ever thought you'd be doing. But that's what this path is. It's literally to be a miracle worker. And that's just, again, another self-concept. It's not the final awakening to the Christ, but it's a step. It's a self-concept that takes the place and gets exchanged for what you thought you were. Because if you remain attached, addicted to, identified with what you thought you were, you are remaining attached to the past. And you can't know the present and be attached to the past. You see, it has to be a loosening. So here, he's gone to that big kind of dance, dinner party dance, and he's immediately going to try to practice with his swings, but this is how it seems at the beginning. It can seem quite daunting when you feel like you're just operating based on solely on a past reference point. And then Jesus says, you believe it may take a miracle for you to make the turn around. And he said, and you're right, it will actually take a miracle intervention in the mind to turn your mind away from the past, because that's what you've been solely focused on. So we get to watch in this movie, again, no spiritual phraseology, no religious phraseology, no philosophical phraseology, just watch the characters. Here we have our Bagger Vance, he's like our Holy Spirit character, and then Juna. And then of course Hardy's just like the willing one who is representing the true empathy. The I believe in you witness. I still believe in you. I still believe you are the greatness that I know that you are. I have not changed my mind about you. And the other good thing about this movie is Bagger Vance will be with Juna through the process of guidance, of pray, listen, and follow, until Juna reaches a point where he doesn't need a physical representation of the Holy Spirit. He starts to internalize it. He starts to really go into the intuition fully. And that's like when I was saying, like, you can reach a point where you don't need the course. You actually reach a point where you set the book down, and he does mention that directly in lesson 189 in the workbook. Forget this world, forget this course, and come with holy empty hands unto your God. It's the same thing. Like, you can do it. You can do it. I'm with you. I'm inside you. You have everything that you need. You may look to external symbols for a while, and that can help. But then you have to, let go of the training wheels. Ride the bike. Balance, pedal, go forth, on your own with your confidence in the Spirit. So we get to see the whole thing acted out in front of us with no spiritual phraseology. Now that's a theater. That's what we need. We need witnesses. We need to be witness of how this can be done. And just an example of how it can look. So there's our cross. The vertical is the quantum field. The quantum field of wholeness. Everything absolutely connected, everything in absolute harmony, healing what is the present moment. That's the vertical. And when he tells Juna, each time you see the field, he says, I see the field, 400 and some yards long, the people. There's the horizontal. There's the personal perspective. That's what hell is. The personal perspective. And yet, the present moment offers the quantum field where everything is absolutely connected. That's like, Rumi, there's a field, I'll meet you there. What is Rumi? He's not talking about a field of grass. There's a field, I'll meet you there. He's talking about the union, the harmony, the connection. And so basically, the Holy Spirit is now saying it's time that you see the field, because the only alternative, if you don't come in contact with the field, is to hack away. And that's how people feel about their lives in linear time. Just hacking away every day, hacking away, trying to do the best that they can, hoping for the best day that they can come out with, taking the good with the bad, and not feeling really joyful, because it's like just hacking away, trying to grab a little bit of joy, but never having consistent experience with that joy. And the field is the joy. So that's why in this analogy, Bagger Vance is saying it's time. It's time for you to see the field. And And the one thing that it does take to see the field is the basic requirement is you have to be willing. That's why if you look at the text of A Course in Miracles, there's many, many, many instances of the words little willingness. Little willingness, little willingness. Jesus is planting them all over the Course, little willingness. And then there's one part in the Course where he says it takes great willingness to see that all events, encounters, and circumstances are working for the good. That's like in the Bible, all things work together for good for those who love the Lord. When you're in the field, all things work together for good. There's no opposites. There's no duality. There's no this or that. There are no decisions to make in time. It's just to come back to the present moment. That's why Jesus taught in the Bible, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. A hand is very close. And there's other texts that have said the kingdom of heaven is all around you, in the Gospel of Thomas. But basically, it's different ways of saying you need to come into the present moment, and that's that moment of non-judgment where you get a glimpse of how blissful and peaceful and wonderful, of how it feels to be in complete harmony. So here we go, and let's see how will Robert Redford take us all together into the field. Wow. Let's leave it to the master. Thank you, Robert. Hey. So, Jesus tells us that this world is backwards and upside down. He tells us we can't judge our advances from our retreats. He tells us in no situation do we perceive our own best interest. And he also tells us we have to go through the darkness to the light. So, you might say, as you watch the script playing, as you watch this dream, that the purpose of every situation, the purpose of every scenario, I would say even the purpose of every relationship is to allow the darkness up in your mind so you can let it go forever. People talk about falling in love. They're really just looking for an opportunity to allow the darkness up so that they can let it go. So here we go. Golf match is easy to get into the old competitive way, winning, losing, comeback. But remember, the whole world is upside down and backwards. And that's why even when he's picking his clubs, Bagger's like, well, there's a time to take it out of the bag and there's a time to leave it in the bag. What do you think? Which time is that for you? That the Holy Spirit has to be with us as this loving presence, encouraging us to come back to the light, to let go of the whole game, to let go of the pursuits and the avoidances, the attractions, the repulsions, to actually even let go of the ideas of better and worse. How willing are you to let go of better and worse? What if there is no better? What if the solution is, you remember that song? You say potato, I say potato, you say tomato, I say tomato, potato, potato, tomato, tomato. Let's call the whole thing off. There's some wisdom there. So as we're watching this, everybody's getting their hopes up, and the hometown hero and everything, and then he has a very bad hole, And then the play continues, but now we're getting to get a glimpse of what the guidance is for. The guidance is there to take us through the darkness of our mind, to allow the unconscious darkness, the belief in separation from God, to come up. It's actually good when it comes up in our daily lives. It's good when it comes up in our relationships. We don't think that. We think, uh-oh, it's going wrong. Something's going wrong. I'm going to lose the relationship. And Spirit knows that it's not about gaining or losing relationships. It's about forgiving the world, forgiving this trick of a world that seems dualistic, past and future, good and bad, right form, wrong form, win and lose even. All these are concepts that were made up. There is no win and lose in heaven. But all of our stories, the reason we root for the characters is there's a section in the Course called the hero of the dream. And that hero of the dream is the body. And the serial adventures of the hero is what this world is about. The ego made up time and space, and it made up its hero, the body. And that's why all the stories and movies we watch, it's easy to get sucked in, pulling for the hero, rooting for the hero, wanting the hero to win. But in the end, the guidance of the Holy Spirit is about, let's call the whole thing off. Let's come to the quantum field. Let's come to that moment where we see everything the same. There's even a part in the Course where Jesus says, make this year different by making it all the same. He's saying, see the world with the Holy Spirit, see the sameness of everything. And the only way you can see the sameness of everything is in the quantum field, where you see it holistically, like in the movie, where he just was having him swing. Look at Bobby Jones, focus on the swing. Don't think of the flag, you're trying to slay it like a dragon. Let go of all your past learning, of even what competition means, of what striving means, about winning. Let go of what you believe about succeeding. If you can't judge your advances from your retreats, what's your chances of succeeding when you can't judge anything? And that's the ultimate teaching, is judge not, lest you be judged. It's like, just for a moment, join and merge with the Holy Spirit. And don't think of stopping the judgment, just see that you never, ever were capable of it. Come into the field and see that there was never anything to judge, never anything to pursuing externals. So here we go. Now, how is Robert Redford going to show us that? That's going to take the master. Here we go. So the Holy Spirit is just with us through the temptations. And you can see his last temptation was to lie. Little Hardy was like, I saw it, but I don't tell no one. It's just, this lie is just between us two. And the Holy Spirit character, Bagger Vance, says, no, that's a decision that Juna has to make. So in the end, wholeness is about integrity, is about honesty, is about atonement. That's correction. Choosing wholeness. Choosing to be aligned with the Creator and choosing our own wholeness and not buying into any temptations of the world that would be a lie. Because when there's a lie, then we try to cover it. We try to pretend, push it out of awareness, pretend. And the atonement is that the separation never happened. You are still as God created you. So you can see Bagger Vance says, you won't be needing me anymore, with the integrity of choosing and not trying to deceive or hide. Because all deception is self-deception. It's not like we deceive another. We are just deceived in ourselves when we believe we have to lie for some gain, to win or to gain something or prove something. But in the end, that's what the correction's about, is the consistency, being able to just really line up with that wholeness, which is what we've seen. See the field. That's how we see the field. No lies, no tricks, just our own authentic swing. We go from losing our swing to finding our own authentic swing, to finding that rhythm back. Okay. All right, that's our bedtime story. Have a good rest, and have very sweet dreams, inspired by the Spirit. Yes.